Dragon copies all, and no questions at this time.
Copy. Next up will be my call to you at T-minus 1 hour.
Okay, Dragon copies all, and no questions at this. Okay, Dragon copies, standing by.
Now we're going to send it back to the desk.
All right, thank you, Daryl. It is T-minus 1 hour and 13 minutes, and we understand John I has been listening in, has some more information to pass along on what's been going on, what information the crew has. So, John I, let's hand it over to you and Hawthorne.
Okay, Dragon copies, closeout team has departed.
Thank you, Marie. It's, as she said, T-minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, 24 seconds. The good news is we are on the timeline. While we were interviewing Bob and Doug, we did hear some discussion with the crew over the SpaceX to Dragon crewnet. They gave them an update on a couple of issues that we've been working. The one of great interest right now has been the hatch close. They summarized that, as you saw on the monitors, we did reopen the hatch. They found a small piece of FOD, and they also worked on the seal around the hatch. They also did add a little bit of lubricant. They closed the hatch and then reran the 5-minute leak check, and they got a good result. So the crew heard that, and they are supportive, and that issue is now resolved and behind us. The other issue that we've been working that they briefed the crew on is just above the first stage where the propellant tanks and the inner stage meet. You can't see on your monitor there, but there are some weep holes, and what we've seen is some water, I think, from maybe rain that has gotten in there has drained out, and that gave a little bit of discoloration. They wanted to make sure that might not be something else like the RP1 fuel that's on board the rocket. So they've done some review of data. They see no issues with the fuel system, or in this case, it's the grid fin system that's in proximity in that area. They believe it's water. They briefed the crew, and again, that issue is now closed out. So coming up on just inside T-minus 1 hour and 12 minutes, we've closed up our couple issues, and as we also heard just a couple minutes ago, the closeout team has left the crew access arm, so we're looking good on schedule. So Jesse, everything in the very busy last 20 minutes or so has come together and closed out. What else has been going on?
That is awesome news, John. Thank you for that very detailed update. We're just 1 hour and 11 minutes from launch, and it just keeps getting more and more exciting, especially with those updates coming in. Since arriving at the spacecraft, the crew were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks which were successful, and communications checks with the core here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and tracking and data relay satellites that will use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
And after those suit checks, we were looking for the leak check on the hatch. So we closed the hatch, and as John and I explained, there were some pressure changes. And so they reopened the hatch, removed what appears to be a piece of foreign object debris or FOD, reclosed the hatch, conducted those leak checks, and everything has come out well. So the closeout team is departing the pad, and weather operators are kicking off the final check on wind speeds at the pad, and that'll be used for the final go, no-go poll for launch. Before we get to that final go, no-go, the various teams at both NASA and SpaceX will do an internal go poll, making sure conditions are right with the Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the... So let's check back in on Houston for a status on the team supporting the space station on their readiness for launch. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Leah. The team here in Mission Control Houston remains go for launch. All systems on board the station that required to be healthy for mission are continuing to look good. Before the station team is go for launch, they verify that key systems on board the station are functioning as expected. This includes life support systems like oxygen generation, carbon dioxide removal, and the water recycling system that allows us to reuse about 9% of the water we send to station. We're also ensuring that the computers that allow us to command the station's major subsystems, essentially the station's nervous system, are functioning normally. We also work with our Russian counterparts to ensure both methods of controlling the station's attitude or the direction station is pointing are fully functional. This includes the large U.S. gyroscopes and the thrusters found in the Russian segments. Both systems play a critical role during Dragon's docking. Mission Control Houston will be closely monitoring the crew's flight and checking off milestones for most of the journey. Lead NASA Flight Director of Crew 1, Anthony Varia, will lead flight controllers in Houston for launch, and they will all be coming back tomorrow for docking, where we join joint operations with SpaceX. So I'll send it back over to you, Marie at KSC.
All right, thank you, Shaniqua. If you are just now joining us, you picked a great time as we are now at T-minus 8 minutes and 22 seconds until launch. Welcome to coverage for the mission known as Crew 1, NASA and SpaceX's second flight with crew to the International Space Station. Liftoff time is still holding for 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time, an instantaneous launch window, and we are tracking no issues currently with Falcon 9 or Crew Dragon. The range is green and weather is cooperating so far. The last check, it was 50% go. Over the last 3 hours, our crew of Victor Glover, Mike Hopkins, Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi donned their SpaceX spacesuits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room. They walked out of that crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport in Florida has done since Apollo 7. They were then transported to the pad, where our crew entered the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft you see live on your screen atop the Falcon 9 rocket.
Well, this is SpaceX's second time flying astronauts in Crew Dragon. It will also be the first time a private company will fly a crew of 4 people to the space station. If you remember, back in May, we launched NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken to the space station in the historic Demo 2 mission and then brought them safely home in August. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have the crew arm and the launch escape system, and we'll begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 7:27 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 27.5-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station, set for Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern.
So, Nicole, you know, we're coming up on T-minus 1 hour in about 6 minutes. And I know when we were listening to Daryl talk to Bob and Doug, Doug talked about how, you know, there's not a lot of time to think about your emotions. You're focused on the operation and your procedures.
Yeah, your emotions are kind of in you at this point, and you're just trying to make sure you're as best prepared for, you know, what's about to happen.
Sure. And today's flight is the first of 6 planned rotational missions NASA has contracted with SpaceX as part of the agency's Commercial Crew Program. The success of the Demo 2 mission allowed for NASA to complete certification for SpaceX to fly astronauts regularly to and from the ISS, bringing back this critical capability of launching from American soil, which we haven't had the ability to do regularly since the retirement of the space shuttle in 2011.
If you've been following along, you've been able to hear that we have been hearing a little bit from crew on board Dragon Resilience, currently strapped into their seats, and they've already gone through all of their communication and suit leak checks. Now they are able to follow along with all of the action still ahead on the displays that are just above them. There are a couple of touchscreen displays, and that allows them to get insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed down towards launch. So we're currently at T-minus 1 hour and 5 minutes. Let's check in with John Innsbrucker for another status update on both vehicles. How's it going there, John?
Yeah,
Thank
just a
you,
heads
Kate.
up.
T-minus 1 hour, 5 minutes.
Closeout team to clear the VDA. Once that's complete, we're going to cycle the tank valves to equalize the manifold pressure. This is the same thing we executed yesterday earlier this week during dry jets.
Okay, we copy that, and Jay, your call's coming in a little bit soft, and we're losing you kind of at the end of them.
Copy all on that call, and I'll let you know when we're ready for that tank valve cycling.
Yeah, just a heads up. We're waiting for the...
Okay, Dragon copies, and that was much better. Thank you.
Once that's complete, we're going to...
Okay, we've just heard a little bit of the dialogue between the crew inside the Dragon capsule Resilience and the SpaceX Dragon team. Looks like they're going to be cycling a little bit of pressure, giving the crew a heads up. Probably hear some of that noise.
Okay, we copy that.
Now, as I've mentioned, we're T-minus 1 hour and 4 minutes, counting down. Good news is, as you heard a few minutes ago, we've resolved a couple issues we were working earlier in the count.
And I'll let you know.
And while the pace was busy before, now it's going to begin to pick up again. Falcon 9 is into its checkouts of first and second stage propulsion systems and engines. That's in preparation for propellant loading. We're going to hear polls between T-minus 47, T-minus 45 minutes on readiness for propellant loading and then on to launch. And then at T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading will begin. Now on Dragon, we've done our checkouts. Everything is looking good. The astronauts are currently inside Dragon. The hatch is closed, and the leak check is successfully complete. The SpaceX folks have left the access area and I believe are now clear of the blast area. So we'll have 2 major events coming up on Dragon. Between T-minus 45 and T-minus 42 minutes, we're going to see that crew access arm currently alongside Dragon. That's going to retract away from the capsule. And then we'll follow that pretty much immediately by arming of the Dragon launch escape system. That needs to be armed prior to loading propellant onto the Falcon 9. We're launching out of historic pad 39A from the eastern range. The range is green and go to support launch, not only here, also the worldwide network of ground stations and the on-orbit tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support Dragon as it heads to orbit. And the good news, weather continues to be acceptable both at ground level and the upper altitude.
Dragon SpaceX, we are cycling the orbit tank isolation valves to equalize pressure.
With the call out from core. They're cycling the valves to equalize pressure. Now, as a reminder, we have an instantaneous launch window today at 27 minutes, 17 seconds after the hour. So once we get into propellant loading, there's no opportunity to change the T0. Once we get into propellant loading, and actually right now, we're committed. We can't slow down or add some more margin time. We've got to finish up the last 62 minutes. But the good news, Jesse, at just inside T-minus 62 minutes, we are go for launch.
It's great to hear, John. Sounds like everything is going back to normal, is that right? We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and earlier this year we completed a test run of the mission that we're just an hour away from beginning here today.
And the purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly humans to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 2 was a truly exciting moment and paved the way for today's mission.
And Dragon SpaceX valve cycling is complete.
Dragon copy.
And good words from Cord to the crew. But that mission paved the way for where we are today, sending this full crew for a long-duration expedition aboard the International Space Station.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As Leah mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 23 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 22 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle. It's fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but also features full manual override capabilities in case of emergency. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley tested these capabilities during the Demo 2 mission to the station.
Many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at some of these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from bottom of the trunk to top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon is composed of two main elements.
SpaceX, just passing T-minus 1 hour. Your go for Section 6. When ready, report go for launch.
Dragon copy. Section 6 is in work.
T-minus 1 hour, we're getting there. But the capsule that the crew is flying on today is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and it also has an unpressurized section known as the trunk.
The nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system and also the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts.
Opposite the nose cone is the trunk. It provides attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and cargo. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new picotiling technology. The other half contains solar cells used to charge the spacecraft's batteries.
The spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon Resilience for 6.4 of 4.100 launch prep. Dragon is go for launch.
Copy, go for launch. Yeah, we're looking good on weather, and you can expect the next call to be the C brief at T-minus 45.
And very exciting.
Dragon copies all.
Very exciting. We just got confirmation that Dragon is go for launch. The next call coming up will be from the launch director. So exciting that we are on target for T0 today. Back to what we were talking about, the seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board.
That control panel is centered between the pilot and the commander's seats. You can see it a little bit here on the right side of your screen. That consists of 3 touchscreen displays, allowing the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually.
And finally, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
We are now T-minus 57 minutes from launch. This day is the beginning of regular crew flights to the space station from U.S. soil, NASA having certified SpaceX for these missions after the successful Demo 2 flight test, which launched in May and splashed down safely in August.
Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second mission with astronauts aboard and its first long-duration mission to the International Space Station. It's been an awesome countdown so far. Weather is still looking good. We just
on countdown. The technical team has been pulled and is ready to proceed into the propellant load. Thank you.
And not only is weather good, but sounds like we're proceeding into propellant load. So we're at T-minus 56 minutes and 37 seconds, and we're just getting closer and closer to that T0. So exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great countdown today. Of course, a few things we didn't expect, but nonetheless, everything's continuing on schedule. So starting with suit up, just over 3 hours ago, the SpaceX team helped the crew put on their suits and conduct initial checkouts before crew walkout. Crew walkout was where Victor Glover, Mike Hopkins, Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi gave final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they began that roughly 20-minute ride to pad 39A.
And what a cool ride that was. What you're seeing on your screen is them getting into their vehicles, waving goodbye. We got some great footage of those Teslas heading down the NASA Causeway before the crew arrived at the pad. And once they got to the pad, they took a minute to take in the sights. There you can see on your screen. They took some pictures and then they headed up into the fixed service structure to begin a process known as crew ingress, where the astronauts entered the vehicle and the SpaceX team performed a series of checks to ensure their suits, the seats, and the vehicle interactions were all functioning properly.
And about 15.
As a reminder, step 55.72 is open for propellant load go, no-go buys.
That's the team continuing to discuss the go, no-go for propellant load. But about 15 minutes ago, the team closed Dragon's hatch with the crew safely inside. So with about 55 minutes to go until Dragon starts breathing fire, things will pick up as we get close to that go, no-go to begin propellant loading and arming the launch escape system.
The crew will pull for readiness, which was completed just about 5 minutes ago. And the Dragon pull for prop loading was just called out not too long ago. Next up at T-minus 45 minutes will be an internal mission control Hawthorne pull, and then the launch director's pull for propellant loading. When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew access arm will retract and the crew will get the call to close their visors and arm the launch escape system. This is the automated system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And then once we reach about T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading for Falcon 9 will begin. We've heard some chatter about whether they're go, no-go, continuing those polls. And throughout the countdown, we've been getting some pretty incredible views of the astronauts inside Dragon, making their final preparations, as well as some close-up views of the suits. The teams have often described those suits as an extension of the Dragon spacecraft. It's almost a mini spacecraft inside a spacecraft. They're all custom fitted, just as we were discussing earlier. And I think it's very interesting as well, their seats are custom fitted too. So nobody gets to really choose where they sit today. It's already been decided. And with that, we want to hear a little bit more from the
for this place.
And go ahead for displays.
I just wanted to check. We did notice that on the left side of the display looks like possibly one of the iPads, one of the tablets is still in there. Is there when are you planning on bringing that down?
And we were going to get that right prior to the LES arming.
Copy all.
That's the core speaking with Dragon. The crew also has some tablets they can use to monitor the milestones of the mission. But for right now, we want to hear a little bit more from the KSC side. So, Daryl.
Yeah, thank you very much. Back here at the Kennedy interview desk, and you know, we talk a lot about the astronauts, what they're doing in the preparation for good reason, but they have a lot of work to do. They're going to be doing some science, and joining me now is Dr. Lucy Lowe from the National Institutes of Health with one of the hundreds of experiments that our astronauts are going to be working on. And so one of them, the big one that you're working on and studying, is called tissue chips. So, Lucy, what exactly is a tissue chip?
So, yeah, great question, Daryl, and thanks very much. Great to be here this evening. So, a tissue chip, this is an example of a tissue chip. It's a tiny bioengineered device that contains human cells, and it's designed so that it mimics the structure and function of human cells and organs in this tiny little device. And so the idea is that we can use these to understand human physiology, we can use them to model diseases, and we can even use them to test drugs and therapeutics in human systems before they go into humans, for example, in clinical trials. So really, they're just models that we can use to model disease and then test therapeutics for safety and efficiency.
taking actual tissue that's been genetically engineered, right, and to see how
Not
it reacts?
necessarily, no. So
Some
there's
of it's
lots
real.
of different ways that you can put cells on these chips. You can buy them, but you can also use stem cell technologies to actually create cells from all kinds of different organs and tissues: heart, liver, lungs, skin, brain, bone. Lots and lots of different kinds of tissues can be created from stem cells, and they can be put onto these tissue chips, and then you can model diseases and all sorts on a little chip like this.
Fascinating. We're looking at some video, I believe, of one of these tissue chips being put together. Kind of explain us through what we're seeing.
So what you're seeing there is one of our kidney chips that the Tissue Chips in Space program from the National Institutes of Health and the ISS National Lab has been funding. So this chip here is actually, it's being seeded here. You're seeing that blue fluid coming through in those little triangles, those little squares are cells that are being placed into the chip. And they're put in there with this pink stuff, this extracellular matrix that keeps them alive and keeps them bubbling away, happily chatting to each other over the course of a few weeks. And so what you're seeing there then with the blue fluid coming through is how we feed those cells during that time that they're up on the space station.
Got to keep them alive.
Exactly. They need all their nutrients, they need all their stuff that keeps them feeling good up there.
So what is the benefit of an experiment like this? What can we glean from this and hopefully in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Daryl. So when astronauts go up to the space station, they have a lot of changes that they see in their bodies that look very similar to certain kinds of disease states or even aging down here on Earth. So when we put cells onto tissue chips and we send them to the space station, we're able to see the same kinds of changes that might happen to the astronauts, but on a very, very short time scale. So for example, diseases that might take months or years or even decades to actually be a clinical problem down here on space, on Earth, can actually be modeled in space in just a couple of weeks. So we can really accelerate the disease modeling using these tissue chips and then see how different drugs and therapies act on them. So we're super excited that some of the Crew 1 folks might be doing some research for us. So thanks very much, guys.
Fascinating, and thank you very much, Dr. Lucy Lowe, for being with us here from the National Institutes of Health. That was a fascinating experiment, and we hope the astronauts get some good work on it so that you can further develop your research. Really
Wonderful. Thank you, Daryl.
All right, very good. And so now we'll toss it back to Hawthorne, California, and John I for the latest at T-minus and 49 minutes and counting.
Thank you, Daryl. T-minus 49 minutes, 7 seconds, continuing to count down. Right now, the launch director, launch team are preparing for the readiness for propellant load and launch pole. The SpaceX launch director has checked with the Dragon mission director and the NASA launch manager. They are ready to proceed. Currently, we're doing an electronic poll of the 7 members of the SpaceX launch team for their go to load propellant and then to press on with launch. Now, the Falcon launch crew is located in Firing Room 4 in the Launch Control Center, adjacent to the historic Vehicle Assembly Building on Kennedy Space Center. Key NASA launch members are also located in the firing room. Now, what we're waiting for right now is we expected about T-minus 47 minutes to hear the results of the poll. While we're waiting to hear that, a couple other status items. The crew is currently on board, and the crew access arm is about to be retracted. You can see the access arm currently in the pre-launch position alongside the Dragon capsule. We'll rotate that out of the way, then we'll arm the launch escape system on Dragon before we go into loading propellant on the Falcon 9. We're launching out of pad 39A, heading northeast out of the eastern range. The range continues to be go for launch. They're monitoring clearance area around the launch pad as well as the air and sea space around the flight corridor. Now, the good news on the weather front, we have been given a new probability of violation of only 20%, or as the optimist would say, 80% chance of good weather. There's a small chance of a shower, but it would have to pop up pretty much right over the pad here at the last minute. They're looking, ground winds are cooperating, upper altitude winds are cooperating. So the weather officer gave us some good news about 10 minutes ago as we got inside of T-minus 1 hour. Now we're coming up on T-minus 47 minutes. And the SpaceX team is finishing up their go, no-go polls. We're waiting for a few more people to give the electronic thumbs up so that then the SpaceX launch director can check that item off and then proceed into the remainder of the countdown, which will include propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes. So let's listen in for a moment to the countdown net.
Dragon SpaceX for ARM timeline.
And go ahead for the ARM timeline.
Yeah, we were just talking here about the tablet and how much time you'll have to put it away. Essentially, as soon as the T-minus 45-minute brief occurs, we're going to begin retracting the ARM, and we'd like to be ready to arm the launch escape system immediately, as soon as that's complete.
And Dragon copies. We will go ahead and take care of that now.
Copy all, thank you.
Heard a little bit of dialogue there between Core and the Dragon crew looking at a computer notebook that they're getting ready to put away, letting the crew know what the timeline would be once we finish the go-no-go poll and we give the instructions to the launch team at T-minus 45. Then we'll proceed into retract of the Axis arm. You can see it's currently alongside of Dragon, and then we'll go into arming of the escape system, pardon me, years of previous experience. And then finally, we will get into propellant loading. Right now they're getting just the last thumbs up. People have been looking at data that we were gathering just outside of T-minus 1 hour as we were doing final checkouts of the Falcon 9 on the propulsion and engine systems before we got into propellant load.
Poll is complete and the team is ready for crew access arm retract, propellant loading, and launch. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed into launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operator shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators advise launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. In the event of a fire alarm at firing 4 today, key operators noted below will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly south. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
The safety of the operation, operator shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately.
Now you've heard it, just inside 44 minutes, the SpaceX launch
operators
director
advise launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules.
The Dragon team is going to begin
In the event of a fire alarm at firing 4 today,
everything
key operators noted below
right on time in the countdown.
at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly
and
south.
It looks like the crew access arm
Launch
has
control,
already
you may
begun
proceed with arming the
to
crew
retract
arm for
away.
movement.
Just a beautiful
Copy
sight.
arming crew arm.
So this is one of the last major visual milestones that we have before launch. So the crew access arm now moving away, and we are T-minus 43 minutes and 15 seconds from launch. We're standing by as we wait for completion of the crew access retract. Shortly thereafter, we should hear the call out that the launch escape system is armed. And after that, we will hear that F9 prop loading has begun.
And now, earlier this evening, we saw NASA astronauts Victor Glover, Mike Hopkins, Shannon Walker, and JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi suit up. That was about 3 hours ago. They made the drive out to Launch Complex 39A. Ingressed Crew Dragon about 2 hours ago, and the spacecraft hatch was closed a second time after and then they had a successful leak check. And again, we've just seen the crew access arm retract, and what we heard a few moments ago was that once this process is complete, they are going to go ahead and arm the launch escape system immediately. So we're going to wait to hear the call out that the crew access arm retraction is complete, and then we'll explain a little bit more about this launch escape system, what it is, why it's armed at this point, and why it's so significant. So again, we're at T-minus 41 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. We've just watched the crew access arm retract. That is the suspended walkway that attaches the rotating service structure to
Fixed service structure.
the fixed service structure, excuse me, I'm talking shuttle speak, to the Crew Dragon capsule. So we watched the arm retract away. So now we see Crew Dragon.
Crew arm stow is complete.
And we heard confirmation that crew arm movement
Dragon
is complete.
SpaceX, with that call, you are go for Section 7, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Okay, Dragon copies, moving to Section 7.
So their confirmation from Core telling crew that they are allowed to move on. You hear us mention move on to Section 6, Section 7. That's simply making sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of which procedure we are now working toward. So that was just the Core, who is the person that is essentially the single voice communicating to the crew inside.
Dragon, visors are closed. We are arming the launch escape system.
Copy.
And there we heard Commander
Mike Hopkins.
Thank you. Commander Mike Hopkins informed that they are now closing their visors and now commanding the launch escape system to be armed. Now the launch escape system is basically the crew's path to safety in the event of an anomaly, quite simply. If we were to have an abort scenario here on the pad, we have demonstrated the efficiency and success of that system, having done a pad abort test. Previously, we did a launch escape system test mid-flight earlier, I believe it was January of this year. And so basically this is a system
Launch
that
escape
could
system
return...
is verified armed.
I only caught the tail end of that, but it sounded like the launch escape system is armed.
So now the launch escape system is armed. Essentially, this is the system that all the way from now on the pad until they are in orbit, the crew would be able to escape safely in the event of an anomaly. That's why it is so important that we check the weather all around the world, really. It's not just the weather here at the Cape that we're looking at in order to determine if we're go or no go. It is the weather along that entire escape corridor.
Right. And as Kate was mentioning, again, the launch escape system is armed. That has to happen before the SpaceX teams will proceed with fueling Falcon 9. And so that propellant loading process is set to begin at T-minus 35 minutes, so just a few minutes from now. And what that looks like, Kate, you talked about the tests that were done. You did a pad abort test back in 2015. You did an in-flight abort test at the beginning of this year. And so what that looks like in action, if it were to happen, a pad abort test, or excuse me, a pad abort would be before liftoff at any point from propellant loading, which begins in just under 3 minutes now, until the moment of liftoff. If something were to go wrong and the crew were in danger, Crew Dragon can kind of act as a rocket on top of a rocket and propel itself off of Falcon 9 using its 8 built-in Super Draco thrusters, right? And so the idea is that if that happens, Crew Dragon would splash down off the coast, and then we would have a rescue scenario.
Correct.
And so we've rehearsed that ahead of time. We coordinate very closely, the NASA and SpaceX teams, with the Department of Defense Detachment 3 to prepare for a scenario such as that. We're also prepared for if there were to be a need for a launch escape after the point of liftoff, at any point from liftoff until they reach orbit, about roughly 12 minutes after liftoff. At any point in that sequence, Crew Dragon could still launch itself off of the Falcon 9 rocket. And in that scenario, Crew Dragon would splash down at some other location further downrange, farther away from Florida, obviously. And that's why the weather downrange is just as important as the weather around the pad for liftoff, because they're thinking about how are we going to rescue the crew if we get into a scenario like that.
Exactly. So it's really complicated, but it is a system that we have spent a lot of time designing and testing, and it's definitely something to consider in terms of that weather criteria that we do look at.
And so now at T-minus 36 minutes and 20 seconds, in just over a minute, we should be hearing that Falcon 9 is ready for propellant loading. That'll be with the RP1, which is rocket grade kerosene, and then also simultaneously the liquid oxygen loading will begin.
Once we begin loading that liquid oxygen, we'll see plumes of what will appear to be white smoke. It's actually the liquid oxygen vaporizing, turning from liquid form into gas form around the rocket itself in the rather humid Florida air.
And Nicole, I know, we're just about 30 seconds from fueling, but from your perspective, obviously this launch escape capability is not something that the space shuttle had. So from an astronaut's perspective, what's your take on having the ability to abort from the pad or in flight?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's what we need to be doing with our spacecraft. And I think anytime you can better ensure the survival of your crew in any situation during, launch and on the way to space, that's what we need to be doing.
Launch auto sequence has started. Propellant load has started.
So we just heard that call that propellant load has started. That means fueling of Falcon 9 has begun. Okay, so we are now at T-minus 34 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. Fueling of Falcon 9 is underway. The launch escape system is armed. And again, today is the first in a series of 6-month missions for NASA's Commercial Crew Program.
Launch auto sequence has started.
And the Dragon capsule was loaded with propellants about a week and a half ago, just a few miles down the road from us.
Yeah, that's an area that we affectionately refer to as Dragonland.
Yeah. Yep. And in order to fly, Dragon needs fuel and an oxidizer. So for the fuel we use, Kate, you're going to have to help me with these words.
No
I can't pronounce them.
Yeah, so it's monomethylhydrazine, or MMH, and nitrogen tetroxide, or tetroxide, for also known as NTO, for the oxidizer. These are two propellants, a fuel and an oxidizer, that when they come into contact, they combust instantaneously. So it's a great propellant to use in spaceflight because you don't need an ignition source. So we use those propellants to maneuver Dragon on orbit, and those propellants super power the Draco engines, as well as the 8 Super Draco engines that would be utilized in the launch escape system in an abort scenario.
And again, we want to be crystal clear. Now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means that the 8 Super Draco engines built into Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule away from the Falcon 9 rocket in an instant if there is any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or on the pad. Now let's go over to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for an operations update. John?
Well, we are counting down those final minutes, and everything is still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch just under 33 minutes from now. As you heard, Falcon 9 began propellant loading right on time at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, the propellants that feed the Merlin engines that power Falcon 9 are 2 liquids. One liquid is the fuel, the other is an oxidizer. And that fuel is a refined form of kerosene, also referred to as RP1. Now, our oxidizer is densified liquid oxygen, also called LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles, and it takes up less volume. This allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called TTAB. When TTAB comes in contact with oxygen, it ignites, and it gives off a green-colored flame. Once we've got the flame going, we can then add the kerosene fuel into the chamber, and the engine goes to main power. And you might see the green flash just as the second stage engine ignites, following stage separation 2 minutes, 48 seconds into tonight's flight. Now, currently, we're early in the propellant loading. The first stage fuel tank is about 10% full, and that first stage is the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle you can see on your screen. You've got the black carbon fiber landing legs, then the white propellant tanks of the first stage, topped off by that black cylinder, the inner stage. Now, liquid oxygen loading is also underway on the first stage. That loading will begin on the second stage, which you can see on your monitor, which is the cylinder, the white cylinder just above that black interstage. Liquid oxygen loading on stage 2 begins at T-minus 16.5 minutes. And we'll continue loading liquid oxygen on both stages until the last few minutes of the countdown. Helium loading into pressure vessels is also underway. We use that to pressurize the tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. Now, on board the Dragon spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded
Cryo-helium load.
into the Falcon 9. And the call out you just heard, ground loading and the crew know that helium loading is going on the vehicle right now. So as I mentioned, the astronauts are listening to this right now. As part of their training in the simulator, we also can give them the playback of sounds that we've recorded in Dragon capsule during recent flights. Plus, they also had a discussion with Bob and Doug after their flight, who related what their flight experience was like earlier this year. Now out on the Eastern Range, we continue to hear they're green, ready to go. There are no problems, and they are go for launch. And finally, the weather, as I mentioned a little while ago, it's actually improved during the day. We're down to 20% probability of violation. The biggest thing we're watching is just in case in these last half hour, if a rain shower might spring up within a mile or two of the launch pad. But currently, the rain looks like it's holding off. The upper altitude winds are good, and the ground winds are very light. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity just under 3 days from now. But let's turn it over to Jesse and Leah for an overview of events after liftoff.
Thanks, John. For Crew 1, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 27.5 hours, and their journey is much longer, but fairly similar to the trip NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken made earlier this year in Crew Dragon's first mission with humans aboard.
As we await T0 in just about 29 minutes, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. You're looking at a live view of our teams at the Cape as they prepare for liftoff. Now, as we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, we wanted to give you an overview of what the ascent portion of the mission will look like.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
At about 50 seconds into flight, Falcon's 9 engines will throttle down to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket, or what we typically refer to as max Q. It's worth noting that once we hit max Q, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
Once we are through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle up our Merlin engines again. And from there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
First is MECO, or main engine cutoff. This is where all 9 Merlin N1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is our second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second stage, with the first stage making its way back to Earth for landing as the second stage continues on its journey with the third event. SES, or second stage engine start 1, is where the MVAC engine lights up and propels the second stage along with our Crew 1 astronauts to orbit.
As Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back to Earth. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite and then shut down. This helps to slow the stage down in preparation for entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
While the first stage is heading back to Earth, the second stage will cut off its 1 Merlin engine that was ignited right after stage separation. Once this happens, we will wait for confirmation of a good orbital insertion.
And about 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. The landing burn, which is a single engine burn, will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
While Falcon 9 first stage is landing, Dragon is preparing to separate from the second stage. At about 3 minutes after the second stage gets into orbit, we should have a great view of Dragon with its 4-person crew drifting away from the second stage. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it will begin checking out its Draco maneuvering thrusters to make sure Dragon continues to increase separation distance from the second stage. It's worth noting that these are not the Super Draco engines that would be used during an abort scenario.
And about 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the nose cone hooks to unlatch and open, exposing its guidance navigation controls, or GNC, that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
And lastly, once the nose cone is deployed, the remaining Draco thrusters on the forward bulkhead will be checked. From there, over the next 27.5 hours, Dragon will begin its approach phase, undergoing a number of phasing burns as it makes its way to station. All of that will be coming up soon.
Stage 2 cryo-helium load.
And confirmation, stage 2 cryo-helium being loaded now. But for now, let's check back in with Marie at Kennedy Space Center. Marie?
All right, thank you, Leah. If you're just joining us, we are now at T-minus 25 minutes, 5 seconds and counting from the second astronaut launch from U.S. soil this year, and the first with 4 astronauts aboard Crew Dragon. We want to go over to NASA's Garvey McIntosh. She is standing by in Japan to speak live with the president of JAXA. Garvey, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Marie. Hello, I'm here in Tokyo, Japan. This is Garvey McIntosh, and I'm going to interview JAXA President, Dr. Hiroshi Yamakawa. Dr. Yamakawa, konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
Could you tell us about the partnership between JAXA and NASA?
Oh, thank you very much for your question. The US and Japan have built a close relationship in the aerospace field for more than 50 years. And NASA and JAXA have been collaborating in many fields, including earth science, space exploration, human space activities, and aeronautics. Astronaut Noguchi participates in the Crew 1 mission as the first foreign astronaut on board a US commercial spacecraft. This shows a trust relationship between the two countries. We recognize that this mission is an important milestone toward future international space exploration, and we will firmly support him from the ground.
Thank you very much. Could you tell us a little bit more about today's mission and what the mission represents for Noguchi-san?
Well, as the first Japanese astronaut on board 3 different spacecraft, Space Shuttle, Soyuz, and Crew Dragon, I'm sure he will play an outstanding role based on past experiences. Experiments on the ISS are expected to contribute to the advancement of people's lives on Earth. Protein crystal growth experiments in microgravity environment may lead to the development of new medicine. Japanese private companies are also getting to use the experiment module Kibo for the initiatives. We expect that we will the utilization of Kibo. Thank you.
Thank you. And last question, looking a little bit towards the future, I know recently Japan, along with 7 other countries, including the United States, recently signed the Artemis Accords. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Artemis Accords and what that means for future space exploration?
Well, last month in October, the Japanese government signed the Artemis Accords, representing the strong partnership as one of the first countries to join in the future international space exploration. Well, I think Japan has expertise in human and robotic space technologies accumulated through our experiences, TV and Hayabusa 2. And we will continue to move forward with technical considerations with NASA and other international partners. In addition to the field of human spaceflight, we will continue and deepen our cooperation with NASA and our international partners in order to explore the new era of space and contribution to our society on Earth. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, and arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'll pass it back to you, Tamira. Thank you.
All right, so we just took a look at numbers across all of our social channels, and there are over 500,000 people tuning into this broadcast right now. And the hashtag #LaunchAmerica is trending at number 20 on Twitter, last time we checked. And Marie, Kate, Nicole, I've got some great photos rolling in, and I have a few that I just have to share right now. So take a look at this first one. We've got this little explorer asking if there's room for one more on the mission.
Aww. I love it.
I know. Let's go to the next one. We've seen so many cute space pups today, and this corgi and its little NASA onesie is just the icing on the cake.
Yes. I can't get enough space dogs, so.
Okay, let's go next. How incredible is this little patriotic astronaut holding the flag? Now, y'all, this one definitely made me pretty emotional the first time I saw.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Check out how awesome Kiana looks in her blue flight suit, and I mean, wishing her hero, Victor Glover, well on his Launch America mission. So you've seen it there, and for those of you at home, thank you for sharing a piece of what this mission means to you with us. And in these final moments, let's check in with Shaniqua at Mission Control in Houston. Shaniqua, what's the latest?
Thanks, Tahira. The space station team here in Houston is focused, and critical systems on the station continue to function normally. The teams have verified the command path from the ground up through the constellation of communication satellites to the station. Everything is nominal, and the station will be ready to receive Dragon tomorrow. NASA Flight Director Anthony Varia has been leading the operations planning between the joint NASA and SpaceX teams for the Crew 1 mission, and with the mission about to begin, he passed along this to the teams. No matter the spacecraft, our jobs remain the same. We will protect the crew, we will protect the vehicle, and we will perform our mission. We remain tough and competent. We operate with resilience. Anthony and team are on console here in Mission Control for launch and will be back tomorrow for docking. A reminder that a launch today will take about 27.5 hours to get to station, docking Monday to the Node 2 forward port scheduled at 10 p.m. Central Time, 4 a.m. GMT. Once Dragon is fully docked to the station, the team here in Houston will assist the Dragon and space station astronauts with leak checks as they work to open hatches on both Dragon and inside the station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch open to take approximately 2 hours after docking. That's it for us here in Mission Control Houston. I'll send it back over to the team in Florida. Marie?
All right, thank you so much, Shaniqua. We are inside of T-minus 19 minutes until launch. So exciting. We started the day with 50% probability of launch, and now we're up to 80% chance of the weather cooperating. So we are so excited. I know we're going to be turning our attention solely to the pad and going over to Hawthorne to take us through the final count. But one thing that really stuck out to me earlier, and I wanted to mention, when Shannon was talking about her path to becoming an astronaut, she talked about how she was 4 years old when she decided that that's what I want to do. And it really stuck out to me because my 4-year-old daughter is watching and she's dreaming about becoming an astronaut. And it's so special for, I think, especially for little girls, maybe I'm biased, but to be able to have a role model like Shannon and like you, Nicole, because at the time when Shannon was 4 years old, women weren't astronauts. Yeah. And what an amazing time to be in when little girls have women to look up to, and African-American children have Victor Glover to look up to and see that, they're represented and they can do this too.
Yeah, and I think NASA and the world of space exploration, from the human spaceflight side for sure, has been, over the years just so progressive in understanding how this diversity is so important. And I love thinking about your 4-year-old daughter watching launch tonight and being excited about this. And I'm thankful to be here tonight with you two ladies kind of representing.
I'm super excited. I have seen SpaceX launches before. I've seen shuttle launches before, but I've never been this close to the launch pad. And my palms are sweaty with excitement. And it's going to be incredible. Night launches here, they just light up the sky. And so I'm super excited, and I can't even imagine, I think a lot about Victor Glover this evening because, as we said before, this is his first time going to space. He has thousands of hours as a test pilot, like a super impressive resume. And this is his first time going to space. And I'm so excited for him to be part of this mission and get to go to the ISS after a long wait.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful destination. Let me just tell you that the four of them are going to, do amazing work there. And it's been mentioned a couple times before, this partnership that we have that's allowing us to do such incredible things that are just ultimately about improving life on Earth. It's very
Absolutely.
cool.
And Nicole, I think it's worth mentioning, we didn't talk about this earlier, and I know you are a very humble person and you're focused on the crew that's on the pad right now, but you are the last resident International Space Station crew member to launch from and then land back on U.S. soil. So I think that's significant.
Yeah, as a shuttle crew member, and it's kind of weird to think that was that long ago, but I don't think any crew members goes into it thinking about what first or last it is.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, having worked at Kennedy Space Center for 10 years as a NASA engineer, and to be able to support a mission like that and be here watching this tonight, really historic event, this is the place where we learn that there is a solution to every challenging problem. And in the words of a person I mentioned earlier, Mr. Honeycutt, here's how we can, not why we can't. And that's what we saw go on tonight as well.
Absolutely. And with T-minus 15 minutes, 10 seconds and counting to liftoff, we want to focus in on the pad as we proceed through the final stretch of the countdown. We will turn it over to Hawthorne to take us through launch at 7:27 this evening, Eastern Time. John?
Thanks, Marie. As Marie mentioned, everything is looking good for launch of Falcon 9 and Dragon. It's going to come at 27 minutes and 17 seconds after the hour, just a little under 15 minutes from now. We began propellant loading on Falcon 9 on time at T-minus 35 minutes. You may have heard earlier the call out, the fuel is completely loaded on the second stage, so the RP1 kerosene fuel is complete. We also got the start right on time 2 minutes ago of liquid oxygen loading onto the second stage. Now on the first stage that you can see with the white plumes coming off of it, fuel loading is continuing. We're about half complete with fuel load. That'll finish in 8 minutes at T-minus 6. Now densified oxygen, the liquid oxygen, continues to load on the first stage. That'll come down and finish about T-minus 3 minutes. And then as I mentioned, the second stage has just begun liquid oxygen loading just 2.5 minutes ago. That will continue all the way down to T-minus 2 minutes. Now currently, eastern range is go. Everything continues to look good. And the weather, as we said, has continued to cooperate. You can talk about it, you can't do much about it, but tonight it looks like all conditions are good on the weather. And finally, Dragon. The Dragon mission director and team, they are reporting no issues. They've completed the communication checkouts earlier in the countdown. You can see the crew access arm is retracted away. What you have left now is just the strong back alongside of Dragon you can see on your monitors. We have armed the launch escape system. The crew is strapped in and they are ready to go. Their next major event's coming up at T-minus 10 minutes. They're going to get final instructions relayed to them. The crew displays will be configured for launch, and that allows the crew to get insight into how launch is proceeding and provides constant updates on vehicle health to the crew that you can see on the right-hand side of the monitor. The crew will also at that time close their visors in preparation for launch. Now at T-minus 5 minutes, we'll be in terminal count, and Dragon will transition to its internal battery power. We'll hear continued callouts on the countdown net as we get close to 0 and to liftoff. But right now, 12.5 minutes to go, everything looking good. Leah and I will be commenting, but we're going to let you listen into a lot of the discussion and just enjoy the last 12 minutes of the countdown as we head for liftoff again, 27 minutes, 17 seconds after the hour.
That's right, John. It's so exciting. Only 12 minutes, 13 seconds until liftoff now. And just some things that you can look for, especially upon ascent. You'll be hearing some performance calls as we get into the final countdown and then after liftoff. These are SpaceX flight controllers. They're reporting the trajectory, the speed, the booster performance, and some of the key milestones for Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon on the way uphill. It's about a 9-minute ride to orbit, and a few minutes after that is when we'll see Crew Dragon separate from the second stage. and begin flying free on its own. Some of those other calls you'll hear upon liftoff are number and letter combinations. These mark different abort zones throughout the flight. The first two are 1A and 1B. This signifies they're in the first stage, and that will last until they're up to the very north of North Carolina. The next are 2A through 2E or 2 Echo. Those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. That lasts from the top of North Carolina all the way to the tip of Newfoundland in the northern Atlantic. There's also a spot we want to avoid in the northern Atlantic, and so you might hear the call Shannon or forward to Shannon. Of course, that's not to be confused with our crew member Shannon Walker today, but that actually refers to Shannon, Ireland. It means they would target off the coast of Ireland if they were later in that second stage and needed to abort. But that next call out we're listening for to the crew should come up at T-minus 10 minutes that the crew displays. Those 3 panels in front of our astronauts will be configured for launch. Now just 10 minutes and 35 seconds to go until liftoff. Also, as John and I mentioned, that stage 2 fuel load is complete. Stage 1 is at about 90%. Liquid oxygen load on the second stage is about 40%, and on the first stage, about 85%.
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon. Displays are configured for launch.
Copy, Resilience. We're honored to have you as our crew as we begin operational missions to the ISS. Have an amazing trip and know that we are all for one.
Thanks, Jay. And to all the people at NASA and SpaceX, by working together through these difficult times, you've inspired the nation, the world, and in no small part, the name of this incredible vehicle, Resilience. And now it's time for us to do our part, Crew One for all.
Copy all. Thanks, Hopper, for your Resilience. We're honored to have you as our crew as we begin operational missions to the ISS.
That was the voice of Commander Mike Hopkins confirming those crew displays are configured. And that T-minus 10 minutes was another check for the Falcon 9 launch commit criteria. It was checked by some computers. It was the last check of a wide variety of the Falcon system data to make sure we are go. From here on, we continue to count down until T-minus 7 minutes when the pre-valves open.
And now it's time for us to do our part, Crew One for all.
Copy all. Thanks, Hopper.
T-minus 8 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. As Liam mentioned, the next major event at T-minus 7 minutes, we will open the pre-valves. Currently, the Merlin engines on the first stage are isolated by valves that are between the propellant tanks and with the Merlin engines. We'll open the pre-valves. That'll allow us to begin passing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the inlet of the turbo pumps. That'll chill them down to get them ready for when we bring the pumps up to full speed at T-minus 2 seconds. We want to make sure that the pumps are chilled so that there's not any opportunity for the liquid oxygen to possibly get in contact with a warm pump and turn into gas, something you want to avoid on a turbo pump.
7 minutes and 40 seconds now to lift off. We're still watching those fuel levels tick up, and in the first stage, we're almost at 100% of that densified kerosene. As we mentioned, second stage is full. First stage fueling should be complete for that RP1 at about T-minus 6 minutes.
Standing by for pre-valve opening.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
And there's the call out. Stage 1 engine chill has started. indicates that we are opening the pre-valves, liquid oxygen now beginning to flow slowly through the turbopumps on the Merlin 1D first stage engines.
Next call out should be in about 30 seconds from now. We'll be looking for stage 1 RP load complete. That's the densified kerosene, that fuel on the first stage, already full on the second stage, and we'll still be loading liquid oxygen.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
Up until about 2 minutes prior to liftoff on the second stage. Standing by for that fuel call.
Stage 1 fuel load is complete.
Okay, right on time, and a great view of Dragon sitting on top of the Falcon 9 as we're continuing to load liquid oxygen onto both the first and second stages. The RP1 kerosene fuel is now completely loaded on both stage 1 and stage 2. All continues to go well, just under 6 minutes to launch.
In about 30 seconds, we'll enter terminal count. Dragon's onboard computers will take control of the vehicle.
Stage 1 fuel load is complete.
Both fuel on first and second stage is complete, and liquid oxygen loading continues with the second stage at about 80%, first stage at 95%. Something else you might notice is water rushing the pad shortly before liftoff. That's to suppress the sound and keep any sound from imparting a load on Crew Dragon as it prepares to lift off.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count. Dragon is on internal power. Falcon 9 propellant tanks are pressurizing for strongback retract.
Good confirmation that Dragon is on internal power. And now we'll be looking for a major milestone before we launch today. That'll be the strongback retract. John, you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Leah, if we get a close-up of the Dragon at second stage.
Strongback is retracting.
We've heard the call out, strongback retracting. That's a two-step sequence. First, there are clamp arms around the very top of the second stage. You can see one of them just above the gaseous oxygen vapors coming out of the second stage. Those arms will open up, and then just inside of T-minus 4 minutes, once the arms are released, we'll begin to retract the strongback alongside the vehicle. It'll move back 2 degrees in position, and by about T-minus 3.5 minutes, we ought to be finished with that. The strongback will retract to 45 degrees away from the rocket.
Strongback is retracting.
Once we hit T0 as part of the liftoff sequence.
And at T-minus 3 minutes, we'll
Right now, we're waiting for the retract. And there you can see the strongback is beginning to move away from the vehicle. And it looks like we are just about into the required pre-launch position, just a couple degrees away from the Falcon 9 and the Dragon capsule. But right now, T-minus 3 minutes, 8 seconds, everything continues to be go on Dragon and Falcon 9.
Currently standing.
Dragon is in terminal count.
And Dragon is in terminal count, and we are standing by to hear that stage 1 liquid oxygen loading is complete. Stage
1 LOX load is complete.
And there we have it, and stage 2 should finish shortly after at about 2 minutes prior to liftoff.
So now the last major event is finish liquid oxygen loading on stage 2. It wraps up at about T-minus 2 minutes. Then at about T-minus a minute and a half, we have to drain back and vent down the liquid line that goes up the strongback alongside the Falcon 9. If you see a large white cloud about midway down around the rocket, that's normal. That's, again, just the gaseous oxygen hitting the warm,
Stage
moist
1
Florida
LOX load
air.
is complete. Stage 2 LOX load is complete. Dragon is in auto idle.
And good calls that stage 2 liquid oxygen load is complete. That means we have full fuel on the first and second stages, that densified kerosene, and we're full of the oxidizer. Liquid oxygen on the first and second stage as well. Now just a minute and 20 seconds until liftoff today. And as you can hear those sounds, like Soichi Noguchi said, the vehicle is alive.
Stage 2 lock load is complete.
Coming up in 10 seconds, we'll look to hear that Dragon is in countdown.
Dragon is in auto idle.
And Falcon 9 is in startup.
Dragon is in countdown. FTS is armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling. Ground gas closeout is starting.
50 seconds now until liftoff. That FTS you heard is flight termination.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
SpaceX, this is Resilience. Roger, go.
Go for launch, and at 37 seconds, the International Space Station flying over Kennedy Space Center.
All for one, crew one for all.
Crew Dragon poised to go catch it.
Dragon is at countdown. FTS is armed. Falcon 9
20
is in startup
seconds
and
till
is now
liftoff.
T-minus 15 seconds. Falcon 9 is configured for flight. 10, 9,
Dragon, SpaceX,
8,
go for launch.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
Roger, go.
1, 0. Ignition.
And resilience rises. Not even gravity contains humanity when we explore as one for all.
M1E propulsion is T-minus 15 seconds.
That's the word we want to hear. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
seconds into
3,
this historic
2,
mission, flying
1,
crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9. Stage 1 is preparing to throttle down.
Roger, 1 Alpha.
This is in preparation for max Q, which is maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Stage 1, throttle down.
There's that call out for throttle down.
Power and telemetry continue to be
M1E
nominal
propulsion
for the
is
vehicle, now traveling at 262 meters per second.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
There's that call out. The Falcon 9 is supersonic, and we will be passing through max Q here shortly, the largest structural load during ascent.
Max Q.
And there's that call out. That Falcon
Power
has
telemetry
passed
nominal.
through max Q.
1 Bravo.
And we've just entered Stage 1 Bravo abort
Stage
mode. That's
1,
going to take
throttle
them through the end of the first stage burning just before second stage activates off the coast of North Carolina.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
T plus 1 minute and 40 seconds into flight. Dragon and Falcon 9 traveling 709 meters per second. That call that MVAC chill is underway, the Merlin vacuum engine.
Stage 1, throttle up.
1 Bravo.
Roger, 1 Bravo.
With the call out of MVAC-D chillin, similar to what we saw in the first stage Merlin engines, the second stage engine being prepared for its ignition coming up in just over 30 seconds from now. We're a half a minute away from 3 quick events in rapid succession. We're going to get main engine cut off. The 9 Merlin engines will throttle down and then shut down. We're going to get stage separation.
Stage 1, throttle down.
And then
MVAC
ignition of
engine
the
started.
second stage engine. We've begun the throttle down in preparation for stage separation.
And we have
2 Alpha.
Stage separation confirmed.
And you see that stage separation has confirmed. There goes that MVAC engine. Stage 2. Crew 1 is now on their way to the International Space Station. On the right side of your screen, you see stage 2 continuing to burn. Over on the left-hand side is stage 1 preparing for its return to
And we
Earth.
have Nico. Stage separation confirmed.
Currently on the left
Roger,
side,
2
you
Alpha.
can't make out much.
Acquisition of signal.
It's a couple hours after sunset in Florida, but the
And
grid fins
ignition.
have deployed on the first stage. The first stage is now unpowered, but with the velocity it had, it continues to coast up to an apogee before it begins to descend back into Earth's atmosphere. Now, as we watch, maybe we'll see the lights of Florida or the eastern seaboard in the background, but otherwise there's not going to be much to see. On the right-hand side,
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
you can hear the call out. Trajectory is nominal.
Copy. Nominal trajectory.
And we've heard the call out Bermuda. That means Bermuda ground station has the signals from the second stage of the Dragon and Falcon 9.
We're still continuing as stage 2 burns to listen for those abort zones. We are now in 2A through 2E to Echo, taking us up over the northern Atlantic.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Acquisition of
Right
signal.
now you can see the second stage engine glowing with the standard red that we have come to see over all these missions. Indicates everything's looking good. Power on the MVAC-D engine continues to run at 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of outer space.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
And trajectory nominal.
Copy. Nominal trajectory.
And we hear the reply from the crew acknowledging we have a nominal trajectory. Dragon made it to the Falcon 9 second stage, heading into the low Earth orbit, where Dragon will then separate and begin its trip the rest of the way to the space station.
We'll be looking for SECO, second stage engine cutoff, coming up at 8 minutes and 48 seconds after launch today, so about 3.5 minutes from now. Dragon and Falcon 9,
nominal.
second stage, currently flying 2,979 meters per second.
Now, currently, the first stage has begun its descent. It is through apogee. It's beginning to come back down, where it, coming up in another couple of minutes, we will have the entry burn, where we begin to slow down the first stage.
SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Copy. Nominal trajectory.
Another call out, another nominal trajectory, just what we love to hear.
That voice you're hearing on board Dragon, that's Commander Mike Hopkins speaking for our 4-person crew as they continue their journey now 6 minutes and 12 seconds after liftoff. Trajectory still nominal.
And Leah, you can see on the indicator
Dragon,
altitude,
SpaceX, trajectory
201
nominal.
kilometers. We're now beginning to essentially level
Copy.
out
Nominal
and pick up
trajectory.
velocity to get us into low Earth orbit. We're a little under 1 minute from the ignition for the entry burn on first stage.
And we're about 2 minutes away.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Copy. Nominal trajectory.
Great news, now 7 minutes after launch. Second stage engine continues to burn, everything looking good. And we'll see that continue to burn for another 1 minute and about 38 seconds.
Right now on stage 2, the crew's getting about a little more than 2.5 G's of acceleration.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory
First
nominal.
stage preparing to ignite for the entry burn.
FTS is saved.
Copy. Nominal trajectory.
And we've got ignition of the entry burn, center engine, followed by the other 2 restart engines. First stage now getting ready to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. This is about a 29-second
Stage
burn,
1
and
FTS
it's
is safe.
designed to slow the vehicle way down. We're going to shed about 70% of the velocity of that dropping first stage by the time this landing burn completes. I should
Stage
say
2
by the
FTS
time
is
the
safe.
entry burn completes. which is now over. First stage on target for the drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, we're watching second stage getting close to getting into orbit.
That's right. We've got about 30 seconds
Stage 2 internal
more.
guidance.
And now just about 20 seconds more of stage 2 continuing to burn until we see second stage engine cutoff, or SECO. We'll coast for a few minutes afterward to allow the rates in motion to...
Roger, Shannon.
There's that call for Shannon. That's Shannon, Ireland, an abort zone, but it looks like we continue smoothly to orbit today.
MVAC shutdown. Stage 2 internal guidance.
And we've got shutdown of the second stage engine on time.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Launch escape system is disarmed.
And SpaceX
Roger,
copies.
Shannon.
And Leah, the words we like to hear, a nominal orbit insertion.
That's right, John. Nominal orbit insertion, as we mentioned, stage 2. Oh, looks like some action on stage 1.
MVAC shutdown.
And I believe we've had a touchdown on the drone ship.
We've got stage 1 has touched down on the drone
Dragon
ship
SpaceX,
in the
nominal
Atlantic
orbit
Ocean.
insertion.
But now the more important news, second stage
Launch
is
escape
in
system
orbit,
is disarmed.
right where we
SpaceX
want, right on
copies.
time, and we're getting ready for our next major activity, which will be Dragon spacecraft separation. Now currently on the second stage, we are essentially venting pressure, purging the engine out, making sure everything is quiet in preparation.
Take a look. That's inside Crew Dragon right now. Our Crew 1 crew now coasting in low Earth orbit, still attached to that second stage. In just a couple of minutes, we should see that second stage separate, and Crew Dragon will be flying free.
Expected loss of signal, Cape Canaveral.
Leah, the mission timer shows 90 seconds to Dragon separation.
Currently, Dragon is flying at 27,000 kilometers an hour. And we're T plus 11 minutes since liftoff today, waiting on that second stage separation. But as you can see, our astronauts from left to right, Shannon Walker, Victor Glover, Mike Hopkins, and Soichi Noguchi, now on their way to the International Space Station. First trip to space for Victor Glover.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland.
And that call out, acquisition of signal in Newfoundland. That means the Newfoundland ground station is now receiving telemetry from Dragon. This view inside Mission Control Hawthorne. Teams continuing to monitor the vehicle, now traveling at almost 27,000 kilometers an hour.
Ten seconds to Dragon separation.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland. Dragon separation confirmed.
And separation confirmed. You can see that second stage departing. Crew Dragon leaving it behind.
Separation confirmed.
Now 12 minutes, 25 seconds into today's flight. Our next thing we'll be looking for is nose cone deploy. Our hooks will start to open on the nose cone and reveal those forward thrusters underneath.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Dragon separation confirmed.
13 minutes into today's mission, the view on the right-hand side of your screen coming from Crew Dragon. We had that short look at the second stage as it departed. That second stage will burn up upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon SpaceX, we see nominal service section Draco checkouts and the humidifier activation.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon. We copy all, and we see the same.
Confirmation from teams on the ground and the crew. You can see them monitoring those 3 display panels, monitoring their journey to the International Space Station and where they are in the world right now, or over the world, I should say.
Dragon SpaceX, we see nominal service section Draco checkouts and the humidifier activation.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon. We copy all, and we see the same.
Well, we're in 14 minutes, 25 seconds since it was a great liftoff. Everything happened. We had a nominal insertion into low Earth orbit. You saw Dragon separate. We got the Draco checkouts were good. And right now we're hearing the nose cone hooks are opening up. Everything is happening right per the procedure. And we've got Crew 1 successfully on orbit. So with that, let's head over to our counterparts at Kennedy Space Center. Marie, how was that launch for you all there on the ground?
Oh my gosh, John, it just took our breath away. I mean, we could just turn right around in our seats and watch. We got up away from the desk to get a better look. And then we actually could see the booster coming back down.
Yeah, that was outstanding. Outstanding. And I don't even know what to say. High five. We're like high-fiving through the shield here.
High five. My husband texted me a picture of my daughter watching liftoff. It was just, I'm emotional. Seeing that, and we went on the first attempt. How often does that happen in human space flight?
As it should. I'm very happy. It has been a long day, but just to be able to stand there and actually feel the rocket pounding the air around you was just incredible. And then looking at the light too long, I couldn't see the MVAC ignition, so I still have spots in my eyes.
And then the views inside the capsule too, with the 4 of them, looking kind of mellow, but you could see Victor's kind of letting his arms do a little bit of the floaty thing. I bet he cannot wait to get out of his seat.
Well, he's going to get a chance to here shortly. So he's officially on his way on his first space flight.
So
Incredible.
Victor, Mike, Shannon, and Soichi are now on course to arrive at the International Space Station just tomorrow, Monday, November 16th, around 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to stay live on air for continuous live coverage along their entire ride to station. Though our coverage here at Kennedy Space Center will conclude, we're going to turn it over to the teams in Hawthorne and Houston to take us through the next phases of the Crew 1 mission, all the way through hatch opening and a welcome ceremony for the crew. Now, for those of you watching online via YouTube, take a look at the description below the video. There you'll find the new link for our Crew 1 rendezvous phase, and we'll be continuing live coverage at that new location shortly. But if you're watching on NASA TV, like my parents, you won't notice a thing, and your coverage will continue.
That's right. And as you follow along, we also invite you to tune into a post-launch news conference at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, right here on NASA TV, where NASA and SpaceX will take questions live. And in addition to NASA TV, of course, you can always follow along on Twitter at @NASA and nasa.gov for continuous mission updates. We thank you all so much for watching. To all of our commentators, Nicole, special thanks to you for being here.
My pleasure, ladies. Let's do it again.
Oh, please, yes. Well, we'd love to have you back. Here now are some highlights from the incredible journey that's just begun. Here's our first live look inside the suit-up room. Crew Dragon Commander Mike Hopkins was born in Lebanon, Missouri.
Pilot Victor Glover is a native of Pomona, California.
And mission specialist Shannon Walker is from Houston, Texas.
Mission Specialist Soichi Noguchi is from Yokohama, Kanagawa, Japan.
And here they come, walking down the hall.
Everyone's looking quite peppy there.
Yeah, so cool. They're looking for people. They're looking for the people that have helped them all along the way, too, and wanting to make eye contact.
Here they come. The Crew 1 astronauts now beginning their journey to the launch pad ahead of this historic mission to the International Space Station.
This is Core on countdown 1 for timeline. The crew is departing for the pad on schedule.
This is chase car, so you can be along with the crew every step of the way.
It's kind of like the pre-flight, right? The walk around your vehicle before you get in and fly.
I love this shot.
Yeah.
You know, when this was being designed, it was definitely a forward-thinking design.
And you can see on your screen the crew beginning the ingress process already.
But they are checking to make sure the suits are ready. They're helping them connect the umbilicals. They're buckling them in.
And Dragon SpaceX hatch is closed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
And resilience rises. Not even gravity contains humanity when we explore as one for all. That's the word we want to hear. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Dragon SpaceX for TCS.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we can confirm, despite your alerts, Loop Bravo is healthy, and we're seeing the expected response. We did fail over Loop Bravo, and we'll give you more words shortly.
throttle up. Discovery Roger, go for deploy. Thanks to you and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch. Roger, nice to be in orbit. We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
It has been an incredible day with the launch of Crew 1 from Kennedy Space Center, NASA's first official long-duration mission for our commercial crew program.
So exciting. What an amazing day. We watched the crew as they suited up. We watched them ingress on Crew Dragon. We had an on-time liftoff at 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time. Stage 1 came back and landed back on Just Read the Instructions. We got confirmation of Dragon separation as well as nose cone deploy.
Yes, nose cone deploy came back clear, and we also had some good forward Draco checkouts. So all good news there as the crew continues on the way to the International Space Station. And as we said, the mission has only just begun. Right now, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Soichi Noguchi are flying free inside Dragon after that successful separation from Falcon 9. And now we've got about 27 hours until they arrive at the space station, and we'll be here with you for the entire trip.
Immediately after the Dragon spacecraft separated from Falcon 9, it began what we call the activation and rendezvous phase of the mission. During this phase, Dragon is configured for on-orbit operations. The phase begins after separation of Dragon from Falcon 9 and ends with the completion of the final co-elliptic burn. Our initial orbit today is 210 kilometers by 190 kilometers, with those values representing the perigee and the apogee of the orbit, or the lowest and the highest point over the Earth. That means that the orbit isn't a perfect circle, but more like a very slight ellipse.
Dragon SpaceX, next burn is per your displays, and have some more words on TCS.
Okay, and SpaceX Dragon is ready to copy.
Okay, it looks like during activation, Loop Alpha had a pressure spike, which caused Fitter to trip and fail over to Loop Bravo. However, we do believe that Loop Alpha is healthy, and we're troubleshooting to understand, what our plan to recovery is. However, we are go for the burn in the current TCS configuration.
Okay, SpaceX Dragon copies. We had a pressure spike on Alpha, Fitter swap to Bravo, and you do think Alpha is heavy or is healthy, and you'll get us more words later on how we'll get it back, and we are go for the burn coming up in approximately 19 minutes.
Yeah, good copy on TCS. Regarding the go for the burn, we're still assessing our overall go for the vehicle. However, TCS is in an acceptable configuration.
Okay, yeah, Dragon copies.
And we are also still assessing cabin environment, and I expect to give you some more words on that shortly for suit offing.
Dragon copies.
So those were words from the core, the crew operations and resources engineer here in Hawthorne, to our crew aboard Crew Dragon. They did have an issue with the TCS, or the thermal control system. And you heard another acronym there, the FITTER. That's the fault detection and isolation. It's an automated system to respond to any issues that arise. There was a pressure pump spike on a pump in the thermal control system, and Dragon auto switched to Bravo. We do have 2 fault tolerance on Crew Dragon. And the flight controllers still believe that the pump that had a pressure spike is functional. But the key thing is that we are still continue to go with the nominal burn plan. So over the next 27 hours, Dragon will execute a series of burns, which will gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the station. There are 5 major burns or firing of the Draco thrusters on Dragon that will bring the spacecraft close to station before we begin final approach maneuvers. The first, which you may have heard them discuss, is the phase burn. This is performed at the first apogee, or the highest point of the initial orbit, and it raises Dragon's perigee, or its lowest point, to a higher altitude.
The next burn, which is based on what our orbital data shows us, is the boost burn, which raises Dragon's orbit until its orbit reaches an altitude of just 10 kilometers lower than the space station. Followed soon after by the close co-elliptic burn to place Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station. This means that the crew will be about 10 kilometers lower than the station during their entire orbit around the Earth. The fourth maneuver is the transfer burn, where we're raising Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers below station. And then we round everything out with a final co-elliptic burn to once again maintain a constant orbit beneath station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below.
And then we'll get into the approach initiation and final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. This is also when we start integrated operations between the Dragon control team here in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers in Mission Control Houston. The teams will transition to integrated operations roughly 45 minutes prior to approach initiation. During the approach, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system, which stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles, and sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station. They'll also maneuver Dragon to the proper altitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station.
Tomorrow at approximately 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, Draco thrusters on Dragon will fire for the approach initiation burn when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below station and just about 7 kilometers behind it. This will swing Dragon up until it's about 400 meters directly below the station. This maneuver will also move Dragon inside one of the 2 safety zones around the station that requires a set of go-no-go poles with the different control teams. The first zone is called the approach ellipsoid, which is an imaginary shape measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers, essentially a large 3-dimensional oval. Before Dragon is given permission to move inside of this ellipsoid, referred to by the teams as the AE, it is configured to be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory.
Arrives at 400 meters below station. It will be at waypoint 0, the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold at 400 meters or continue on if all systems check out to approach to waypoint 1. By this point, the teams will do a go, no-go for Dragon to move inside the keep-out sphere, another zone that consists of an imaginary sphere around station with a radius of 200 meters. It gives us another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to station. And it carries a requirement similar to the AE that if Dragon's orbital trajectory would not bring it inside that...
SpaceX for suit doffing.
And go ahead for suit doffing.
Okay, at this time, cabin environments are looking good. So we can give you go for 4.012 and 4.300 for suit doffing, and we are reconfiguring cameras now.
Okay, Dragon copies. We are go for 4.012, 4.300, and you're reconfiguring cameras. And then I want to confirm one more time on the thermal loop caution or warning. We are good that you do expect to clear both of those. Clear that caution.
That's affirmative, yeah. We're currently working on just cleaning up FITR. The response that occurred was both Loop Alpha and Bravo. They both saw the spike which resulted both of them in tripping fitter, and then we failed over to basically a min.
Okay, which copy? You're cleaning up fitter right now, and so MS1 and pilot will be getting out of their seats and starting the suit docking.
All right, a lot there from Crew Dragon and the Core.
And Dragon SpaceX, I copied your last call. We were in a teacher's handover. Have some more words on procedure deltas.
And go ahead for procedure deltas.
On 4.012, note that the large outer bags to dispose the comfort garments are with the suit storage bags in location 17. And on 4.300, note that the waste duffel is already installed and steps 1.2 and 1.3 are complete.
Okay, we copy. Large outer bags are with the suits, and the waste bag is already installed.
Good read back, and I'll keep you posted as we clean up the TCS.
Dragon cups.
Hearing it directly from the astronauts themselves. They are go to doff their suits. They've had them on for quite a while today, and they are able to get into some more comfortable clothes. And so, as you heard, they're also reconfiguring the cameras inside Crew Dragon to give them a little bit of privacy up there on orbit, as well as the thermal control system. They're working at clearing those issues, but everything so far looking good for Dragon.
Dragon's move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 will swing it up and out in front of the station, pausing at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially means that it's directly in front of the docking port. The crew is headed to the forwardmost port on the International Space Station, the Node 2 forward port. That is where Dragon docked for both our demonstration missions and where one of the 2 international docking adapters is located. These were installed for new commercial spacecraft flights and any other future spacecraft that also use the International Docking Standard.
And once Dragon is only 20 meters away at waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the docking adapter. Dragon will then fly in and make contact with the IDA, giving us what we call soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to station. And then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come about 2 hours following docking.
So we have a lot of action to cover for the next 27.5 hours. Let's head down to Mission Control Houston and check back in with Shaniqua Vereen to get a rundown of all the work being done on the station to prepare for Dragon's arrival. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Jesse. A lot of work has been done on the space station before we got to this day to make sure we're launching Dragon and this new crew to a fully functioning orbital laboratory. Several hours before the crew boarded Dragon, the space station team did their own go-no-go poll. There are several key systems we have to ensure are functioning properly before NASA can give a go for launch. One of the more obvious is making sure our life support systems are functioning normally. This includes the ability to turn water into oxygen for the astronauts to breathe, the ability to remove carbon dioxide exhaled by station crew into the atmosphere, and our water recovery system, which is now able to recycle about 90% of the water we send to station. We have redundant or backup systems on both the U.S. and Russian segments on the station, just in case we need to take something offline for repairs. The teams also made sure that there were no faults or issues with the station's power or cooling systems. The station's massive solar arrays generate electricity for all the hardware we have on board. All those electronics inevitably generate heat. We utilize an active cooling system using ammonia and radiators to keep everything running at a stable temperature. We also work with our Russian counterparts to ensure both means of controlling the station's attitude or
Dragon
which way it's pointing are fully functional. On the U.S. side, we have large gyroscopes spinning in the station's truss that are used to stabilize and orient the station on a day-to-day basis. On the Russian segment, we have large thrusters that can be called upon to use fuel stored on board to maintain the station's attitude.
Alerts ahead of the burn.
Okay, we copy. You're still working the TCS issue.
Yeah, good copy. However, that's not a blocker.
And say that again.
Yeah, copy on the TCS issue. However, that is not a blocker to the burn.
And we copy that.
We'll end up using both once it's time for Dragon to dock, switching to Russian thrusters in the final phases of approach, which can respond faster to any forces felt by station from Dragon's thrusters, and then back to gyroscopes, which are normally smoother and ensure Dragon's docking hooks can deploy successfully. Right now, the Expedition 64 crew aboard the station is still asleep, but they're scheduled to wake up at midnight here in Houston, 6 a.m. GMT on Sunday to prepare. On Monday to prepare for Dragon's docking.
This is the crew resilience on the cabin mic comms.
That's astronaut and Expedition 64 flight engineer Kate
Hello,
Rubens
Victor.
will be
I've got you
monitoring
loud and
Dragon's
clear on the
approach.
cabin mic.
How's it going, Jay? Great to hear your voice.
Likewise.
We're hearing good calls from the core on Dragon to ground. But as I was stating, flight engineer Kate Rubens will be monitoring Dragon's approach using special software to make sure Dragon is flying in the expected areas, and she will be on standby to help in any abort scenarios. Once docked, she'll be primed for setting up the hardware on the station side to get ready for hatch opening and pre-positioning some ducting that we'll use to integrate Dragon's atmosphere with the rest of the station. So a lot of work done already, and the station team
Dragon
remains
SpaceX
ready for Dragon to
for
arrive in just about 27.5 hours. For now, back over to Jesse and Leah to take us through the next steps for Dragon.
Yeah, we are going to take commands to clear the fault flag on loop Bravo and then loop Alpha, and that should put both loops running at half speed.
Thanks, Shaniqua. We are.
Okay, you're going to clear the fault on Bravo, then Alpha, then they should both be running at half speed for nominal ops.
Good copy, and we're putting that in work now.
Dragon.
And it sounds like they were discussing those TCS thermal control system issues. They are putting both Loop A and Loop Bravo, Loop B, at 50% so that they can run nominal operations. But looks like we are getting ready to move into the phase burn.
Yes, we are. So we're waiting for Dragon to move into that phase burn. And as we mentioned earlier, there are 5 major burns where Draco thrusters will ignite and bring the spacecraft close to the station before we begin final approach maneuvers. Our initial orbit after Dragon separated from Falcon 9 was 210 by 190 kilometers. Those values represent the the orbit apogee, or the highest point over the Earth, and the perigee, or the lowest point over the Earth. That means that the orbit isn't a perfect circle, and we're going to see Dragon raise its orbit using the Draco thrusters over the coming hours as it chases down the space station.
So as we mentioned, the first major burn is the phase burn, which is performed at the first apogee of the initial orbit and raises Dragon
SpaceX settling burns have started. Just a reminder to minimize any dynamic movements during the burn, but okay to continue suit offing.
Okay, Dragon copies. We are into the settling burns, and Wilco on minimize movement during the actual burn.
And still preparing for that burn, but it'll raise Dragon's perigee, the lowest point of its orbit, to a higher altitude. This burn will use the Draco thrusters located on the forward bulkhead. That's the very top of Dragon under the nose cone, which is now deployed. It'll also use the thrusters around the service section, or the lower part of the Dragon capsule. The thrusters located on the bulkhead are primarily used for these delta velocity burns, which will gradually raise Dragon's orbit over the coming hours.
Dragon SpaceX for TCS.
And go ahead for TCS.
We have cleared the alerts, and Loop Alpha is back up, looking nominal right now. We're going to continue to monitor, but we are going to clear the alerts on the board.
Okay, Loop Alpha is up. We see that both are at half speeds, and you're going to clear the alerts off the board.
Good readback. Yeah, and this is the nominal configuration.
And Dragon copies.
And great news from the core crew operations
and Dragon SpaceX, just for timeline awareness, burn is in about just under 1 minute.
And copy that. We see it starts in 40 seconds. And just for your awareness, both MS-1 and pilot are out of their suits, and they're getting them strapped into their seats this time.
Copy all.
And the phase burn should begin in just a few seconds from now. As you heard, the crew are still doffing their suits. They're allowed to continue moving around the capsule as long as they don't impart any forces on the capsule itself. Additionally, great news that the TCS thermal control system is in a nominal configuration, as they suspected that pump is still functional. And so Crew Dragon continues its journey to the International Space Station. Looking good.
Yeah. Now, in addition to those 4 bulkhead Draco thrusters that Leah was mentioning earlier, there are 12 more Dracos in the service section, which is the area along the lower part of the Dragon capsule. These will be used in every burn and are primarily there to help maintain Dragon's altitude, which is especially important when doing the finely tuned approach into docking. They can also be used for smaller transitional maneuvers as well. And we're just waiting for confirmation of that phase burn.
The view on the right side of your screen here is pretty impressive, I have to say. That's the International Space Station. That's from the International Space Station. It's solar arrays specifically, and it's currently flying, let's see here, over the South Pacific Ocean, about 267 statute miles above Earth. So Crew Dragon is continuing its pursuit of the International Space Station, and that's where you can find it right now. Still awaiting confirmation of the beginning of the phase burn. And actually, phase burn has begun. We are a minute underway, so good news there. And it should last about 9.5 minutes, as we mentioned, raising the perigee, or the lowest point of Dragon's current orbit, to a higher altitude. We've Got a lot of milestones coming up. You know, there were a lot in the countdown to the mission, but there is still a lot to go as it continues its approach to the space station. The next really major milestone comes at 1:10 a.m. Pacific time. Oh, and we're getting words that the burn is proceeding nominally, so that's good. But tomorrow morning, actually, it'll be 4:10 a.m. Pacific time or Eastern time. The Crew Dragon crew will get some much-needed shut-eye. It's been a long day for them. And we try not to really do any burns while they're asleep. We want to give them the opportunity to sleep because those burns, you know, might be a little bit loud, might wake them up. So the next burn will be the boost burn. That won't come until 8:20 a.m. Pacific or 11:20 a.m. Eastern time. So those are just a couple of the things we can look forward to on Dragon's journey to the International Space Station. As we mentioned, though, those are just 2 of the 5 burns. We'll also have the close burn. That comes at 9:02 a.m. Pacific, 12:02 p.m. Eastern. The transfer burn at 2:45 Pacific and 5:45 Eastern. And then the co-elliptic burn. Once these burns, these major burns are complete, we'll be done with the rendezvous phase. And then we'll move into the approach initiation phase. So as we mentioned, we are in the phase burn right now. We're getting good information that phase burn is proceeding nominally. It's about a 9.5 minute burn. And afterward, that's actually raising Dragon's perigee, the lowest part of its orbit, as we mentioned, and that'll put us in place for the boost burn. The boost burn will not take place until tomorrow morning when the astronauts are starting to wake up. They might not be awake just yet. And after the boost burn, which will raise the apogee, or the highest point of Dragon's orbit, to 10 kilometers lower than the station, we will find the closed co-elliptic burn. That's about 45 minutes after the boost burn, and it'll put Dragon's orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station. That means that 10-kilometer orbit below station will be where Dragon stays around the Earth. Afterward, we have the transfer burn. That will adjust Dragon's apogee, the highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers lower than the station orbit. And then the final co-elliptic burn about 45 minutes after the transfer burn, putting Dragon into an orbit co-elliptic with the station about 2.5 kilometers below it the entire way around the Earth. As we mentioned, after that, the rendezvous is complete, and we'll still be about 30 kilometers behind the station at that time. We'll have the approach initiation burn afterward. This, as we mentioned, is beginning that approach phase.
Yeah, and all of these burns, there's several different burns. They're all doing a different thing for Dragon, but basically it's a very precise maneuver to get to the station. It's very important to make sure that we get there slowly and steadily and make our way right in front of the docking port. So every single one of these burns is extremely important and extremely precise.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost dinner time.
Yeah, I think they're getting ready for a meal coming up in just about a few minutes here, about 12 minutes at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. The crew will have their first meal on board Dragon, and they have enough food on board Dragon for 12 meals each, along with snacks for the trip up. And these are MREs, or meals ready to eat. They're essentially prepackaged meals ready for consumption without any heating or additional ingredients. And they also have 55 liters, or about 14.5 gallons of water with them.
Yeah, and these are a little bit different. Actually, they might be a good bit different from their food that they can expect on the International Space Station. MREs, like you said, meals ready to eat. They don't require any work, which sounds like a dream sometimes to me personally. I love that kind of food.
No cooking.
But they just have to open the package and they can eat their dinner. Whereas on the International Space Station, we have thermostabilized food for some of the options, and the astronauts can. There's a small nozzle on each package, and they can plug that into a water source, which will they can turn it to the correct temperature setting that reads on the package, and put the water in. Now mash it around a little bit, make sure it gets all of the food heated up, and then it's ready to eat. So that system isn't on Crew Dragon because it's really only for short destinations. So MREs for now.
Yeah, it sounds very convenient with that small space inside of Dragon that they don't have to do all that cooking and rehydrating of their food. They can just pull out their food and eat it right then and there.
Yeah, and it also means you don't have to wait on everybody else to heat up their food before you get to heat up your food. So everybody can eat dinner at the same time. And a reminder, we are still in the phase burn. And a little under 3 minutes left. Dracos are looking good. Burn is proceeding nominally. It was a 9.5-minute burn. We are standing by for more information as we continue. This burn, as we said, will raise the apogee, the highest point of Dragon's orbit, to 10 kilometers lower than the International Space Station. That beautiful view on the right-hand side.
We are just waiting on that phase burn to complete. It is about a 9-minute burn, and it should be closing here shortly in about a minute or so, but we'll wait for that call out and that confirmation.
And everything we've heard so far is that the burn is proceeding nominally. All of the Dracos are performing well. The first of 5 major burns for the crew on their way to the International Space Station. International Space Station will be their home for the next 6 months, and a really interesting fact is this flight today makes Soichi Noguchi only the 3rd person ever to fly on 3 different spacecraft. So he has flown on the space shuttle, on a Russian Soyuz, and now Crew Dragon, and the only other 2 people who have done that are Wally Schirra and John Young. So he's joining a very select few with this milestone.
It's amazing. We are still waiting for that phase burn confirmation. We are getting some really awesome views of Earth.
Yeah, that never gets old.
I wonder what the crew members are thinking, especially Victor, if this is his first time, you know, in space, seeing the world in this view here. That's incredible.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal burn.
Okay, we copy nominal burn, and we'll be getting into 4.300 here shortly.
Copy, getting into 4.300 shortly, and we can confirm there will be no out-of-plane burn.
Okay, copy that. No out-of-plane burns.
And there's that confirmation of that phase burn is complete and nominal.
And we won't be needing the out-of-plane burn either, which would be in case Crew Dragon needed its journey adjusted just a little bit. So it sounds like they are on the right path as well. But yes, good confirmation of the phase burn, the first of 5 major burns as Crew Dragon makes its way to the International Space Station. So we do have 27 hours, and we would love to answer some of your questions on social media. So if you're curious about some aspect of today's crew mission, please submit your question with the hashtag AskNASA, and we'll try our best to answer it. This first one comes from Nico, who wants to know why it takes about 27 hours to reach the space station on this flight compared with about 8 hours if we had launched yesterday. And I think the key word is phasing. It really just depends on phasing, but also it doesn't necessarily take Crew Dragon 27 hours to reach the International Space Station. It just takes long enough that our crew is going to need a sleep period in that time. So we had to factor in a sleep period. That way they are alert and cognizant and ready to step in case anything needed to be done manually on the mission. So it is a bit longer, but we're here for the whole thing, and you can join us.
Sounds very smart that they plan in sleep, because I don't know if I went all day, 24 hours trying to make it to the station and then trying to function. So I'm glad that they'll get some rest during their trip there. Absolutely.
Another good question, Crew Dragon of the Crew 1 mission, is this a new capsule or is this the refurbished DM2 vehicle? You want to take that?
This is a brand new vehicle for Crew 1. We did not refurbish Demo 2 for this specific mission. So it is a brand new capsule. These are the first 4 astronauts that get to fly on this vehicle. So it must be really exciting for them to get to fly on not only a new spacecraft, but a new vehicle itself as well.
Absolutely. And very cool is that the Demo 2 vehicle, Endeavor, which is what Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley named it, that will be the vehicle for Crew 2 coming up next year. And so I also learned that it will keep its name, Endeavor. The new crew won't rename it moving forward. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that actually is going to be a really exciting flight, because we will also be refurbishing the first stage booster on today's flight for Crew 2 as well.
As we get some more beautiful views from the International Space Station on the right-hand side, let's see, it's currently flying. It's actually about to enter an orbital sunset, or an orbital nighttime, I should say. The International Space Station flies at 17,500 miles an hour, and so it's orbiting Earth, and it sees 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So while it looks beautiful right now, it's coming up toward Mexico and will be entering the orbital nighttime.
Dragon SpaceX for next burn.
And go ahead for the next burn.
Stand by.
Roger, standing by.
But I was mentioning it's, and a really cool view right now, you can see the Cygnus resupply, commercial resupply spacecraft on the International Space Station. Those 2 solar arrays that look like symbols, makes it really easy to spot. And that actually brought up some of the science that Crew 1 is going to be working on while they're on the space station. We'll chat a little bit more about that later.
Awesome. So we have another question here from NASA. At NASA, when do you get to contact family when in space?
That's a good question, and you know, it's very fortunate. The astronauts, I've actually heard many say, especially if they were in the military, they were able to speak with their families more on the space station than they were, you know, while deployed sometimes. And so they get the opportunity to FaceTime, or I guess.
And SpaceX from Dragon for suit off steps.
Dragon SpaceX, go ahead.
Hey Jay, as we mentioned earlier, MS-1 and pilot are complete with their suit doffing. We've completed 4.300, and Commander and MS-2 are going off umbilicals at this time to start the suit doffing.
Copy, MS-1 pilot complete, and Commander and MS-2 are starting their suit doffing now and complete with 4.300. And I'm ready for that burn.
And I'm ready. Okay, yeah, go ahead and give us the words on the burn.
Okay, the boost burn is as scheduled, currently showing 16:20:42 UTC. However, ahead of that time, we may or may not take additional phase burns or out-of-play burns, but we're not currently, there's nothing the vehicle's planning right now.
Okay, we copy. So the next burn is currently that boost burn at 16:20. However, there could be some additional burns in between, but nothing at this time.
Correct, and we'll keep you posted if that changes.
Dragon copies. Hey, Jay, one last thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the view is beautiful.
Outstanding. Yeah, take lots of pictures for us, and also have some words for you from C.
Okay, copy, and we are ready for the words from CE.
Yeah, resilience. On behalf of SpaceX, thanks for flying Falcon and Dragon, and safe travels.
And thanks, Han, to the entire Falcon 9 team. Well done. That was one heck of a ride. There was a lot of smiles. I don't know if you could see on the video. But also to the SpaceX recovery and launch teams and all of the NASA teams and DoD teams. You know, we wouldn't be up here in Leo without your support. Making history is definitely hard, and you guys all made it look easy. And again, congratulations to everyone. Resilience is in orbit.
Thank you so much, and travel safely.
Thank you.
Some amazing words from the crew on board, and what you're looking at on your screen is actually live views from Dragon itself, from Resilience right now. So we are getting to see what the crew is seeing as well on board.
And they did say it was beautiful, and I have to agree. I don't know if there's ever a time you're flying over and it's not beautiful.
Right.
So it has to be a very interesting first flight for Victor, and getting to share it with people he's very close with is really cool too.
Right, I can't even imagine.
So getting back to Rohan's question, when do you get to contact family when in space? As I mentioned, the astronauts do have scheduled times they can video chat with their families. They also have a phone which they can dial their families from up there. So they get to talk with them pretty frequently, sometimes daily, and I think maybe weekly for the video conferences.
Yeah, it sounds really convenient, and probably something that they could really use while they're away for 6 months. And it sounds like they'll get to video chat. At least they've gotten some practice with the pandemic doing video chatting. So hopefully they're used to it, but really amazing that they get to still communicate with their families back on Earth.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. It's been very similar this year. You know, we're all getting a little taste of what it's like to be an astronaut on a long duration mission and having to be just a little bit isolated, you know, in your own space for an extended period of time, and life just becomes much more virtual. And so I think we can understand just a little bit more what it's like to be in their shoes or their suits.
Right. Now again, the next milestone coming up is their crew meal. We are waiting for them to start their meal as they watch this amazing view. That's what you see on your screen. This is the view from Dragon, from Resilience. This is what the crew members get to see on their way to the International Space Station.
Yeah, and they're still getting into their more comfortable clothes right now before we get into that meal. And I'm not sure what they're having for dinner, but I heard what they had for breakfast. And it sounded pretty delicious, whether it was a medium rare steak, I heard, I think a medium burger, some curry.
Right.
I'm having a really easy time remembering all of these things because they sound so good.
Again, we are waiting for the crew to finish getting out of their suits and getting comfortable and getting ready for their midday meal.
It's they each get 12 meals while they're on this flight, or they each have 12 meals. I don't know if they'll need to eat 12 meals on the way or in 27 hours. I think I could do it, but they also have some snacks, so they are well prepared for their journey to the International Space Station. And let's see, it's been a little over an hour from launch now. It's been an hour and 7 minutes to be specific. So I think we have about 26 more to go, and they should be getting settled in, getting out of those suits and looking forward to dinner.
And that hour went by so fast. I feel like we just lifted off. But yeah, I'm waiting for the crew to start their midday meal. They are getting comfortable inside of Dragon now that they're coasting. So out of their suits into some more comfortable clothes. And they are going to be eating MREs, which are meals ready to eat. And as we mentioned earlier, they are meals that they don't have to rehydrate. They don't need to heat up. They could just pull them out and just start eating.
And I wonder what that is. But a good reminder, on the right side of your screen is Mission Control Hawthorne, and that's the teams that are looking all over all of the Crew Dragon systems. We also have Mission Control Houston in Houston, Texas, and that's NASA's Mission Control Center. And a good view of Mission Control Houston. Feels a little bit like home for me. But they will really come into play tomorrow once we begin joint operations as the Crew Dragon gets a little bit closer to the International Space Station, because then we have two vehicles in play. We've got the International Space Station when we've got Crew Dragon. So our teams here are monitoring the International Space Station. Teams in Hawthorne really still looking over Crew Dragon systems.
Again, if you're just now joining us, we did have an on-time liftoff of our Crew 1 mission today, and now we are coasting on Dragon. We are waiting for the crew to start their midday meal, as they are getting comfortable inside of Dragon right now as they coast towards the International Space Station.
Yeah, and just a little bit of a reminder, you know, it's been a little bit since we talked about who's on our crew. We've got all of their first names out there, but Victor Glover, he's the pilot of the spacecraft. This is his first space flight, and he was selected in 2013. And so his training takes a couple of years. Any astronaut training takes a couple of years. And he was officially an astronaut in 2015. He was also a commander in the U.S. Navy. So he was a naval aviator. He was a test pilot in the F-18 Hornet, and he mentioned earlier in the video we watched about him all of the hours he had flying, but this being the first time he'll get to go over a certain altitude and actually reach space. So I know it's a huge milestone for him today.
Yeah, he knew that exact number, that exact height that he's reached. So now he's reached new heights. I wonder what he's feeling right now.
I can only imagine. And it's been a little while since they ate. I think I heard somebody joking about, I hope they weren't too nervous, but it's been a while. I'm sure he's fine. Mike Hopkins is the commander of the spacecraft. He's sitting next to Victor. We are looking right to left. He's sitting on Victor's left, but our right of Victor. He was selected in 2009, and he has spent 166 days in space already aboard the International Space Station. So feels like home to him, I'm sure. He was part of the Expedition 3738 crew. And he was a colonel in the U.S. Air Force as well. So those are our military folks aboard the spacecraft. We have Victor, who is in the Navy, and we have Mike, who is in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And additionally, Shannon Walker, she was selected in 2004. She's a Houston native, so she didn't really have to relocate to come work at Johnson Space Center. She holds a doctorate of philosophy in space physics, which is incredibly impressive to me. And she began her career as a robotics flight controller for the International Space Station. So she was very familiar with the space station, and then she actually lived there. She spent 163 days on station. In 2010, she was part of Expedition 24 and 25. And I think it says something about, you know, we're 20 years on the space station now as of November 2nd. And now we're on Expedition 64, so we've come quite a long way. And our next crew member is actually one of our international partners. He's with the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. That is Soichi Noguchi. He apparently is the funniest one on the crew, according to all of the crew members. And just from watching their videos together, I think I agree. He's pretty funny. He was selected as an astronaut in 1996, and he's actually flown, as we mentioned, on the space shuttle. He flew on STS-114. And that was in 2005. He did 3 spacewalks then. And then he became the first Japanese astronaut to perform a spacewalk at the space station. So he's racking up the titles now.
I know.
Because he also flew in 2010 as Expedition 2223 and spent 163 days in space then. That was aboard a Soyuz. And then today he's now flying on Crew Dragon. So he is now one of 3 people to have ever flown on 3 spacecraft.
He's got a lot of experience. That sounds pretty amazing and pretty hard to do, I would assume. Well, let's take some more social questions. But if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, please at NASA and use the hashtag #AskNASA, and maybe we'll get to read your question and be able to answer it. So we've got one here. How many different sections make up the ISS?
Well, it's very interesting. The ISS, or the International Space Station, if you're watching, this is kind of, it's not in flux by any means. It is complete, but we are seeing new pieces continuing to be added, like the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. That is, as it sounds, an expandable module attached to the International Space Station. And then we're also going to have a brand new airlock added. So the number continues to grow, but it's owned by, I guess you could say, different countries around the world. It really is international. You know, we have a European module, we have the U.S. modules, we have Russian modules, we have the Canada arm, and others I'm sure I'm forgetting. So it's quite large. It's actually the same interior volume of a Boeing 747. If you took all the seats out of a Boeing 747, I think I could make myself comfortable.
And just goes to show you how important teamwork is, right? We have all these countries working together, and that makes up the International Space Station, which is incredible. And now we have more crew members, a diverse set of crew members on their way to join the other astronauts on board the International Space Station.
This next question, what is the difference between previous missions and the current mission, apart from the number of astronauts? So as we saw earlier this year, DM2, actually DM stands for demonstration mission. So that was still a test flight. We had Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley live on the International Space Station for a couple of months. But this time Crew Dragon is certified as a vehicle that can fly to and from the International Space Station. It's not a test anymore. This is the real deal for these 4 astronauts. Another, I think, very interesting thing is it is in relation to the number of astronauts, but this is the first ever 4-person capsule.
Right.
So that's a pretty interesting difference in this mission.
Right, and the capsule is made to have up to 7 crew members, but this mission has 4. And also another difference between Demo 2 and this mission is that Bob and Doug actually had, because it was a test flight, they actually did have some work to do while they were coasting to the International Space Station, whereas today the crew members are actually enjoying their ride most of the time all the way to the station, since this is an official commercial flight. So we've got another question. How many times has the Falcon 9 that was used today been launched? Well, this was a brand new first stage booster, so it's only been launched once, and just an hour ago, about a little over an hour ago. But we are very excited that we are planning to use this same booster for Crew 2 next spring. So that will be its second launch, but just to answer the question, this booster has only launched one time.
And this one, why do they stay up in the space station for 6 months? Well, we are looking to go to the moon and Mars, and the best place to test out what it's like to live for an extended period of time in microgravity is here in low Earth orbit, because it's much, I'm not going to say easy, it's never easy to get anywhere in space, but it's not as difficult to get to and from the space station as it would be to get to and from the moon or to and from Mars. And so living that long on the International Space Station gives us the opportunity to evaluate how astronauts' bodies adapt when they are in microgravity for that amount of time. That helps us prepare for those long duration missions. Additionally, because they're very busy, they've got hundreds of science experiments that they're working on at any one time. Over the past 20 years, we've completed over 3,000 science experiments aboard the International Space Station, and so many of them really benefit life on Earth. So they may be up there for a while, but it's all for a very good reason.
Yeah, it sounds like a 2-for-1. If you're going to go out to Mars, that is a much longer journey, much harder to get back to Earth. So I think these small, almost short sprints in comparison, even though it's 6 months, 6 months is a long time to us, it does make sense. It's like training to get ready for these longer missions, right?
And we're still just waiting for the crew members to have their dinner. And as we mentioned, we're taking these Ask NASA questions. So if you have one, use that hashtag AskNASA on Twitter. We'll be on the lookout. Another one, what is the most crowded the International Space Station has ever been? And the number is 13. So we had 6 expedition crew members and then 7 on a space shuttle docked to the International Space Station. And when our crew members arrive tomorrow, they will more than double the current residents on the International Space Station. There are currently 3 people on board. We've got Sergei Kutsverchkov, Sergei Rizikov of the Roscosmos Russian Space Agency. We've got astronaut Kate Rubins on board. And so adding 4 tomorrow makes 7, which we have not had 7 long-duration crew members on the International Space Station in quite a while.
7 doesn't sound too bad compared to 13, so hopefully they have enough space to be able to, maneuver around for the next 6 months. So we've got another social question. What's the new crew going to be working on for the next 6 months?
Well, we talked about some of the science, and some of the science, as we mentioned, happens on their bodies. They take biological samples that are then compared to ones that were taken before they launched. And then they're taken some more once they get back, and that's all in comparison to how their body adapts to microgravity. We heard someone speaking about tissue chips earlier. They can.
Sounded so cool.
It's so cool. It's totally beyond me, but you can put organs on chips, and essentially it gives them a better idea, gives scientists an easier look at how potential drugs affect organs, and also just helps us to develop things that may eventually heal or treat some of what we deal with on Earth.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all the updates on some of these science experiments, especially the tissue chips one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about science later, because we have quite a list of just examples. But let's see this one. Will Crew 2 arrive before Crew 1 departs? And will there be any overlapping arrivals and departures?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the timing is actually Crew 1 should return prior to liftoff of Crew 2. That's the schedule so far, but it might actually overlap when we do lift off Crew 2. So we don't have the exact schedule just yet, so we will have to wait to see when we announce those schedules.
I think actually we will have a direct handover. Crew 2 will arrive at the International Space Station, and then Crew 1 will leave. So we'll have 2 Crew Dragons on the space station at one time. That'll be pretty cool.
Yeah.
This one, do you have plans to take 7 people in a Dragon space capsule? You can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, Crew Dragon is made and designed to carry up 7 crew members. So there will be a time in the future to have a 7-member vehicle go up to the space station. But I believe Crew 2 is actually going to be another 4-person crew flight. But it is designed to have up to 7 crew members. So hopefully soon in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And NASA doesn't have any current plans to expand from that 4-person crew, but as you mentioned, Dragon can fly 7, so we will have to see one day, maybe on commercial missions, what we do with putting 7 people on board.
Yeah.
This question from Ashley, what do the boost burns do? The boost burn comes tomorrow morning. We are trying to let the crew get some sleep and not awake them with any burns. And so boost burn will raise their apogee, the highest point of their orbit, to 10 kilometers lower than the station. That'll be the second of those 5 major burns we talked about, propelling Crew Dragon toward the International Space Station. So that's the next burn we're looking forward to. We've just had the phase burn, everything looking well for Dragon. And we will not have a burn until tomorrow morning, so quite a bit of time in between that we're going to let the crew get a meal, get some sleep, and then wake up early tomorrow and get ready for their arrival to their new home on the space station.
Right, and as you mentioned earlier, if they do tread the course or go a little bit off course, they will use some extra phase burns if needed, but so far everything is looking good for that next burn being the boost burn. We've got another question. Do the astronauts have some place in the Dragon to sleep, or are they sleeping in their chairs?
They actually are sleeping in their chairs.
Yeah.
They can take off those foot restraints and stow those, so that's an option. It also gives them a little more room to float around inside the capsule. And it's a little more crowded this time with
4 people.
4 people instead of just 2. And so we have... we'll have that opportunity. They also have some window covers that they can put up inside Crew Dragon because, as we mentioned, they're going around the Earth every 90 minutes.
Right.
And that would really mess with your circadian rhythm if you couldn't get some good shut-eye, some good darkness for that full time. And so instead of going in and out of sunlight every 45 minutes, they're going to put up those window covers and hopefully feel like a real nighttime, get some real sleep.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, these are custom seats for them, so they are made for each one of the crew members, so they should be pretty comfortable, I would hope. So they should be able to get some good sleep, knowing that they are custom fitted for each crew member on board. So we have another question from John. How do they do laundry on the ISS? That's a really great question.
I love this question because I wish the answer was true for me. The answer is they don't. They don't do laundry on the International Space Station. They simply throw out their clothes. So,
oh, wow.
I know. So they can wear them a certain amount of times, and they may choose to bring some back with them. However, typically any older, dirty clothes they can put on the commercial resupply vehicles that do not splash down or that just burn up in space. So there's not really a trash can. There's not a laundry machine on the space station. They put them inside of those vehicles that burn up in the atmosphere, and that takes care of that.
So if you don't like doing laundry, become an astronaut.
Yeah, that's a great point. I could do that.
We've got one more question. What personal items can you take to the ISS? You mentioned this earlier. They can only take approved items with them. So what are the approved items that NASA will allow the astronauts to bring with them?
A lot of astronauts choose to bring photos, and they'll put photos up because they have a very small, I guess you could call it bedroom. It's called crew quarters, but it's very small, and they put the photos, on the walls, remind them of home. It's probably their family, their friends, and these are personal items, so we don't necessarily always know what it is, but I've also seen, pieces of jewelry or just special mementos to them if they want to take to low Earth orbit and bring back. So those are just a few of the things that they've taken before.
And again, we are just waiting for the crew to begin their midday meal. So far, we've had an on-time liftoff of our Crew 1 mission. The astronauts are on Resilience right now, coasting along to the International Space Station. We did complete the phase burn, and then
sleep. But being in microgravity is pretty exciting, so I don't know if I could sleep.
Right.
So we'll be looking for them to have that meal, have a good 8 hours of sleep before the next burn tomorrow morning, the boost burn.
We are going to take a quick break, but we will be back. What you'll see on your screen is some live animation for where the crew is throughout their journey, but we'll be right back.